I don't want them in our country, I'll be honest with you, okay? Somebody would say, oh, that's not politically correct. I don't care. I don't want them in our country. Their country's no good for a reason. Their country stinks, and we don't want them in our country. I can say that about other countries, too. I can say it about other countries, too. We don't want them to hell. We have to rebuild our country. You know, our country's at a tipping point. We could go bad. We're at a tipping point. I don't know if people mind me saying that, but I'm saying it. We could go one way or the other, and we're going to go the wrong way if we keep taking in garbage into our country. Ilhan Omar is garbage. She's garbage. Her friends are garbage. These aren't people that work. These aren't people that say, let's go, come on, let's make this place great. These are people that do nothing but complain. They complain. And from where they came from, they got nothing. You know, they came from paradise, and they said, this isn't paradise. But when they come from hell, and they complain and do nothing but bitch, we don't want them in our country. Let them go back to where they came from and fix it.
And we're joined now by Minnesota Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Margaret.
We have a lot to get to with you, but I want to pick up on where the Treasury Secretary just left off. He alleged that people who were tied to you or your campaign were involved in this broad, brazen scheme to rip off the Minnesota state welfare system. Do you want to respond to that? Do you know what he is referring to?
I really don't, and I don't think the secretary himself understands what he's referring to. We obviously had people who were able to donate to our campaign that were involved. We sent that money back a couple years ago. And actually, I was one of the first members of Congress to send a letter to the Secretary of Ag asking them to look into what I thought was a reprehensible fraud that was occurring within the program.
So this was, just for our audience, the Biden-era Justice Department called it the largest COVID fraud scheme in the country. And this was pocketing COVID-era welfare funds, more than $1 billion in taxpayer money that was stolen. It was pretty shocking. Of the 87 people charged, all but 8 are of Somali descent. And that has added to the spotlight being put specifically on your community. Why do you think this fraud was allowed to get so widespread?
Well, I want to say, you know, this also has an impact on Somalis because we are also taxpayers in Minnesota. We also could have benefited from the program and the money that was stolen. And so it's been really frustrating for people to not acknowledge the fact that we're also, as Minnesotans, as taxpayers, really upset and angry about the fraud that has occurred.
Mm-hmm. So do you think, though, that there was a failure by the Democratic state government to police itself? This is a brazen, fraudulent activity here.
Yeah, and that is what I alluded to in my letter that I'd sent to the Secretary of Ag. Going wrong, how can this amount of money disappear fraudulently without there being alarms being set off? And it is something that, you know, we have to continue to investigate. We have to continue to ask those questions.
Because, as you know, one of the initial defenses by the organization at the heart of the fraud, Feeding Our Future, was to claim the probe was due to racism. Do you think that this was all about negligence, or that it was like political fear of alienating the Somali community?
So you have to remember that the woman who led the program is a Caucasian woman. And that was her way of making sure that this would continue to happen by using whatever rhetoric that was available to her. We do know that when the money was stopped, they did sue the AG, Attorney General Keith Ellison, defended the department in that lawsuit. It was a judge that said it should continue, that money should continue to go out. And so this wasn't something that people were not looking at. There was always those alarms, and we will continue to understand where things might have gone wrong as these investigations continue and as these fraudsters are prosecuted and sent to jail.
You know what's wild? Everywhere you look in this story, the numbers don't add up. Yeah, people are out here pointing out the obvious. How does one on a public salary magically leaps from average earnings to tens of millions net worth in just a few years? How does that happen? And you don't need a finance degree to see that something is off, ladies and gentlemen. Because 150,000 a year turning to 30 million in under a decade? I mean, come on. That's not smart investments. That's not luck. And that's not a mystery. That is to be a pipeline. Yes. Instead of addressing the money trail, we're getting excuses, deflections, blame shifting. And somehow it becomes the fault of the system or the investigators or literally anyone except the people who benefited from it. It's crazy, right?
Well, it's going to have impact for your community because we've already heard that the head of Medicare and Medicaid say they're going to have a new policy that applies to Minnesota. You heard the Treasury Secretary say they're investigating. But there's another thread here because House Republicans and the Treasury Secretary just now talked about a link to terrorism, a possible link. He said they're just now beginning to look into it. How confident are you that that's a false claim?
I'm pretty confident at the moment because there are people who have been prosecuted and who have been sentenced. If there was a linkage in that the money that they had stolen going to terrorism, then that is a failure of the FBI and our court system in not figuring that out and basically charging them with these charges. And so I do know that for many years, this sort of like alarm that there is money being transferred through the airport in bags and going to terrorism that accusation has always existed. There's never been here and there in those accusations. But if that is the case, if money from U.S. tax dollars is being sent to help with terrorism in Somalia, we want to know.
Yeah.
And we want those people prosecuted. And we want to make sure that that doesn't ever happen again.
So there are 80,000 people of Somali descent in your state, but the president has been very focused, not just on them, but on you. In this extraordinary cabinet meeting, he said Somalis, quote, come from hell. They complain and they do nothing but bitch. Take a listen.
These are people that do nothing but complain. They complain. And from where they came from, they got nothing. We don't want them in our country. Let them go back to where they came from and fix it. Thank you very much, everybody.
That knocking is vehement agreement from his cabinet members there. I just wonder what the reaction is in your district to have that from the highest office in the land.
It's disgusting. It's completely disgusting. These are Americans that he is calling garbage. And we feel like there is an unhealthy obsession that he has on the Somali community and an unhealthy and creepy obsession that he has with me. I think it is also really important for us to remember that this kind of hateful rhetoric and this level of dehumanizing can lead to dangerous actions by people who listen to the president.
And 95% of the Somalis in your state are U.S. citizens.
Yes.
Just for clarity there. But the president has restricted all immigration processing, including asylum claims from Somalis already on U.S. soil, along with 18 other countries. ICE reports it has rounded up about 19 people. And they put out press releases with the images of about 5 of them that they say are the worst of the worst. Is that the entirety of the crackdown to date?
Yeah, so far we know of the people that they've picked up in Minnesota. About 5 of them are Somalis. And from what I have read and from the people that I've spoken to, all of them had already had orders of removal. So these are not people who are undocumented, but people who have committed crimes and who should have already been sent out of the country.
I want to ask you about something else that the architect of the president's immigration policy, Stephen Miller, said. On Thanksgiving Day, he posted, "No magic transformation occurs when failed states cross borders. At scale, migrants and their descendants recreate the conditions and terrors of their broken homelands." What do you make of this argument of failure to assimilate and sort of ruining America? How do you understand this?
I mean, when I think about Stephen Miller and his white supremacist rhetoric, it reminds me, yes, it reminds me of the way the Nazis described Jewish people in Germany. And you know, as we know, there have been many immigrants who've tried to come to the United States who've turned back, one of them being Jewish immigrants. We know the way that people were described who were coming from Ireland, Irish immigrants. We know the way in which people were described back then when they were Italian immigrants. And to me, you know, we're yes, of course, ethnically Somali. We are in this country as Americans. Yeah. We are citizens. We are productive part of this nation, and we will continue to be.
And the soft interviews, don't even get me started. Not one hard question, not one challenge, just a cushioned landing, while taxpayers get hit with the bill. It's crazy, right? This wasn't just a random fraud. The legislation that enabled these programs came from inside the House. Literally, policies written, programs expanded, money flowing, oversight weak, and now everyone is shocked it was exploited. Come on. I mean, please. And the final punchline, ladies and gentlemen, whenever accountability gets too close, the narrative magically shifts to race, identity, and the blame of the investigators. Every time. It's actually predictable at this point. Yeah. Because the real question is, how does someone walk into public office with a normal net worth and walk out sitting on 30 million? Well, scandals explode around programs that they help create. And ladies and gentlemen, until this question is answered clearly and honestly, nothing else matters. Yeah.
What do you think about that explanation there? Ilhan Omar saying that if taxpayer money did in fact go to the al-Shabaab terrorist organization, it would be a failing on the part of the FBI for not figuring it out.
Yeah, she sounded super confident in that answer, didn't she, Carly? She could not figure out how she was going to convince people that that was the case, but she said it anyway. It's ridiculous. Of course, the only failure here is from the people who are in leadership positions in Minnesota who allowed this fraud scheme to happen. And I'm looking at Ilhan Omar and I'm looking at Tim Walz, and they really are in the crosshairs of this whole thing. And a lot of people are wondering how it is humanly possible that this was allowed to happen. And this thing is huge. You talk to the White House and they have said, look, this is probably so much bigger and far reaching than just Minnesota. We know $1 billion was stolen from the taxpayers there in Minnesota. The White House says it actually is probably just scratching the surface. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And, you have the Treasury saying we do have connections through millions of dollars they think was sent to Somalia, and that ultimately did end up in the hands of terrorists, as al-Shabaab terrorists. And so I think that's, of course, a ridiculous answer, but you're going to hear a lot more of that from Ilhan Omar, from Tim Walz. They're going to do a lot of jazz hands and trying to convince people to look the other way, because they are, again, the ones that everyone is looking at and saying, how is it that you were either so grossly incompetent or maybe willful willfully incompetent that you allowed this to happen in the state of Minnesota. Minnesota deserves better. The American people deserve better. And you know what? The only way they're going to clear their names is by asking for a full-throated, deep investigation and holding those responsible accountable for this.
Yeah, Laura, this is a pretty brazen time to be going on offense against the Trump administration after such a ridiculous fraud. Stephen Miller said that this is one of, if not the biggest frauds in American history, a waste of taxpayer money. And Omar is going back at Stephen Miller. Listen to what she had to say.
I mean, when I think about Stephen Miller and his white supremacist rhetoric, it reminds me, yes, it reminds me of the way the Nazis described Jewish people in Germany.
So a reminder for our viewers, Stephen Miller is Jewish. Laura, your response to those comments?
Yeah, Nate, this is the knee-jerk reaction we know of anybody on the left to try to call people, conservatives and people, especially in the Trump administration, Nazis. Of course, as you pointed out, Stephen Miller is Jewish. That is absolutely insane. But this is what you say whenever you have no response. This is what you say to deflect from your failure as the congresswoman from this area in Minnesota. That should surprise absolutely nobody. What we're trying to see happen now as a country is transparency brought everywhere. That's what this administration, this president is about. We want to know at the end of the day who failed the people of Minnesota here. And I can guarantee you, the FBI we have now is much different than the FBI under Joe Biden. They will look into this. They will investigate. They will find out exactly what happened. And I think Ilhan Omar is probably going to be doing a lot of tap dancing in the foreseeable future, because I don't think she's got a lot of good explanations for how $1 billion from her state just, went missing from the taxpayer funding.
Well, Governor Tim Walz is also up for re-election, so we will have to wait and see if this scandal is big enough to change the hands of political power in the state as well.
If this much taxpayers' money vanished, how are we supposed to believe the people in charge don't know? Huh? Maybe it's time for the FBI to look into Omar's finances. And honestly, that's what happens when transparency disappears. Suspicion fills the gap. You see? Somebody once said, only a crook blames everyone else. Yeah, because that's exactly how it feels for people to watch this unfold. Literally, ladies and gentlemen. Instead of accountability, we are seeing deflection. It gives the impression that the system is the problem, not the people who benefited from it. You see? And when somebody compares this to bank robbers blaming the cops, that tells you that the public think the excuses are getting ridiculous. And they are. Folks are tired of politicians acting like they are the victims of their own scandals, offended by everything, ashamed of nothing, entitled to everything, contributing nothing. And it's not wasted money, it's theft. That's the mood right now. People don't feel impacted, they feel robbed.
I think I want to speak to a few things. One, I want to speak to what Trump has tweeted and what it means for those of us who call this incredible state home. Because facts matter and facts are important. It is unfortunate that we are led by a president who does not understand the laws of this land. When the president tweets as if he has the authority to terminate temporary protected status for Somalis in Minnesota, even little kids in 8th grade know that that is not an authority that the president has and can wield. Temporary status protection for Somalis expires March of 2026, and anyone with that status has 60 days after for it to have any impact on them. And so if you are confused, if you feel threatened, know that the law is on your side and our demented president can't do anything about it. The other unlawful thing that our lawless president is claiming to do so is to terminate that status for only one state, which he has no authority to do so. So, for the 300 or so people that are impacted, that currently live in Minnesota and across the country, we see you and we stand with you, and we will make sure we do everything that we can to help make sure that your status is adjusted before March of 2026. Because you know and I know that there is nothing temporary about people's lives here in the United States. Many of these people that we are talking about have built lives. They own homes, they own businesses, they are a vibrant part of our communities. And we want to make sure that their new home stays their forever home. The second thing I want to speak to is that in this country, we do not blame the lawlessness of an individual on a whole community. Because if you believe in law and order, you understand that if a person commits a crime, they face justice. And that you don't put that crime on a whole community. What we also know is that there is not a single evidence that the president or his cronies have put forth that there are any single resource from taxpayers in Minnesota that has gone to aid and abet terrorism. That language is dangerous. That language puts the lives of Somalis, not only in Minnesota, but across the country, in danger. And if the president believed that, and he had evidence, he would take people to court. So we are sick and tired of the president waking up one day and deciding to put forth falsehoods and demonize whole communities, while the ignorant people that support him then take the lies that he's spreading and use it as a fact. We've seen it during the campaign where he said Asians were eating cats and dogs. We've seen his vice president repeat those lies. We've seen the media run it as a headline as if it was a fact.
There is even broader frustration. Stuff about immigration standards, dual citizenship, cultural issues, all bubbling up because a lot of people think this scandal is a symptom of a bigger pattern, ladies and gentlemen. Importing problems and pretending they are surprises. You see? Because when you strip away all the noise and just look at the situation with basic common sense, the whole thing raises a huge problem and a question. Why does every financial scandal around politicians turn into a maze of excuses instead of simple, straightforward answers? Have you ever noticed that? Most people don't need a law degree to understand something this basic. If enormous amounts of taxpayer money go missing and the people closest to the programs suddenly become extremely wealthy, you don't need a conspiracy theory. You just need basic curiosity. Yes. And nobody's saying jump to conclusions, and I'm not saying that. No. But also nobody should have to twist their brains to pretend the timing doesn't look suspicious.
That is shameful. That is shameful. That is ignorant. It makes us look like a stupid nation that does not believe in truth but traffics in lies. It makes the world mock us, and we are better than that. We are better than that as Americans. Somalis are not terrorizing this nation. We are helping it thrive. Somalis have always seen themselves as a fabric of this nation. We have signed up to serve this country in its military. We have signed up to teach children. We have signed up to become nurses and doctors and engineers. We have signed up to be public servants and get elected into office. We don't do that because we hate this nation. We do that because we love this nation. We do that because we have deep gratitude to the Americans who have given us the opportunity to find a new home, to settle in that new home, to find new joys in that new home, to start families in that new home, and to call that new home our own. We don't complain on the sidelines. We get involved in making America better. And finally, before I get off this stage, I just want to take a moment, because I always jokingly say that Minnesota doesn't just welcome refugees, but it sent one to Congress. But I want most Minnesotans to know this. Majority of us Somalis who are here, as my friend Ali said yesterday, most of us, this was not the first place we came when we came to the United States. But most of us chose Minnesota as our home because Minnesota is special to us. Minnesotans are special to us. When we moved from Arlington, Virginia, and came here nearly 30 years ago, none of us decided to move to another state. My siblings and I and my dad, until he died, called Minnesota home. Because, like I said, Minnesota is special. And I know almost every single elected Somali Minnesotan did not start out in Minnesota, but chose to come here, stay here, start families here, and ultimately serve the people who welcomed them into this beautiful state. So not only are we not going anywhere, we are not going to allow anybody to make us feel less Minnesotan or less American. We are not going to allow anybody to push us into the shadows. We're not going to allow anybody to erase our presence and our contribution. And we are not going to allow anyone to scapegoat us. Because as Somalis, what we learned from Minnesotans is that you have to be resilient to thrive in Minnesota. And we are goddamn resilient.
The real issue here isn't about the accusations, it's the attitude, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of everyday Americans feel like the political class operates in a completely different universe. Yes, one way accountability is optional. Can you imagine? Questions are offensive. The public is expected to accept whatever explanations gets thrown at them that week. And people look at this case and think, if there were any regular person the investigation would have started yesterday. Yeah, but because it's politics, suddenly everything becomes complicated, sensitive, and somehow up for debate. Can you imagine? And at a certain time, it stops being about the left or right. It becomes a question of basic trust, ladies and gentlemen. And right now, that trust is running on fumes. Yeah, and in the end, this whole situation is a reminder of something simple. You can't build a healthy country on double standards. If the rules don't apply evenly to all communities, all officials, all politicians, then this system loses credibility. And once that happens, nothing else works. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, people aren't asking for miracles. They're asking for honesty, accountability, and leaders who treat taxpayer money like it actually belongs to taxpayers. Yes, if this case proves anything, is that Americans are paying attention now, and they're done accepting "just trust me, bro" as an answer.